5 divers from Finland in 2014 made what could be described as a dangerous adventure by carving a triangular opening on a snowy mountain to discover a large cave of 400 feet depth. When they continued to roll downward, the foamed lanes got narrower and the water became extremely cold. At first, the procedure ran just fine, but when it reached a certain depth, something terrible happened. The divers had to go through a very terrible experience whereby the few who survived had to compromise by choosing to live rather than die. This became the start of their ordeal, which claimed the lives of several divers who got lost in the cave. Submerge yourself in the dramatic final moments of these resourceful divers as we tell the chilling story of the Plura Cave tragedy. Let me introduce you to Kai Kankkonen, a professional cave diver who still cannot escape the calls of the deep even after countless catastrophes. His first experience of a disaster occurred when a friend's regulator broke off during a quarry dive, and the diver who died committed a fatal blunder with the oxygen valve. Despite the near mishap, a determined Kai set himself up for a daunting dive in Norway's Plura Cave, Europe's largest underwater cave. Accompanied by cameraman Patrick Gronquist and guide Wesa Rantanen, divers Jari H. and Jari U. planned to get through the 3-kilometer cave in Norrbotten, Sweden from Plura Valley to Steinugelflaget. This 5-hour countdown with a depth of 120 meters announced the possibility of freezing water and other ordeals. Certified and experienced, the divers were divided into 2 teams. Patrick and Jari H. came in first, and Kai, Wesa, and Jari U. came in 2 hours later to let the silt in the water settle down. This strategic gap was important in terms of visibility and security. This is where a true test of the team's ability and endurance came in as they had to face different challenges. On February 6th around noon, Patrick and Jari H. set off on the adventurous dive. They took time and carefully shaped the ice into a triangular form before they stepped into the clear water below. They even distinguished stones which were laid 60 feet underneath, and this marked the beginning of what would culminate into a dreadful event. With them, they introduced an interesting gizmo, a high-performance underwater vehicle that would help them swim faster and get tired less. They also depended on the use of advanced rebreathers which extract CO2 from the expiratory airflow and add oxygen, enabling them to be underwater for longer periods. However, there are some drawbacks associated with rebreathers. When carbon dioxide is not efficiently filtered, the condition known as hypercapnia may result in symptoms such as dizziness, confusion, or even loss of consciousness. Of course, there's always risk in utilizing any machinery, especially equipment as complicated as these, and the more time they spend down below, the risk is even more dangerous. The 2 divers advanced slowly along the 500-meter-long linear shaft, before lowering to 120 meters below the surface of the cave. Here, the passage became much narrower, and the cold even more so. Sharp rock edges were all around them, which meant that even the most insignificant scratch could be fatal. At this depth, they set up a guideline for the team members who would follow them. Then they faced the narrowest part of the cave, requiring a tricky 90-degree turn. Patrick navigated through, but when he looked back, Jari H. was no longer following. Concerned, Patrick retraced his steps and saw Jari's headlamp flickering erratically. Jari was panicking. His scooter's rope had become entangled with a rock. Though he managed to free the rope, he repeatedly asked for backup oxygen, a sign of his increasing distress. Jari lost his rebreather in the chaos, dropping it into the water. Panicked, he accidentally inhaled freezing water, his face contorting in agony. Patrick realized the tragic truth. Jari couldn't be saved. In the cold depths, Patrick had to make the heart-wrenching decision to leave his friend behind and focus on his survival. Patrick's dive computer revealed a daunting reality. It would take him 400 minutes to safely ascend due to decompression stops, far longer than the 120 minutes it had taken to reach this depth. Decompression sickness posed a severe risk if he ascended too quickly. Nitrogen, absorbed into his tissues, could form deadly gas bubbles if not released slowly. As Patrick carefully ascended, his mind was overwhelmed with guilt. How could he leave his friend to die? What would he tell Jari's family back in Finland? The emotional burden was immense. and another worry gnawed at him. Shari's body now blocked the path for the remaining team members. Around 2 p.m., the rest of the team, Kai, Vesa, and Jari Yu, entered the cave. They progressed steadily through the linear chamber, where extra oxygen cylinders had been placed in case of emergency. Vesa initially thought it unnecessary to take one, confident that they would finish the dive in 4 hours. Still, he brought the cylinder along, a decision that would later prove to be vital. When the group reached the 120-meter depth, trouble struck. Vesa became stuck in the narrow passage, her gear entangled. A strange beeping noise echoed through the chamber as they tried to press on. The source of the sound was horrifying. Shari H's lifeless body was blocking the way. Panic ensued as Kai suffered from nitrogen narcosis and Jari Yu, overwhelmed, struggled with his equipment until it malfunctioned. In the end, Jari Yu succumbed to the cave's unforgiving depths. Kai and Vesa faced a critical decision: push forward or turn back. With their oxygen running low, they decided to retreat. Vesa, gripped by fear, removed her gear to squeeze through the tightest part of the cave and then reassembled it on the other side. Meanwhile, Patrick was wrestling with his dilemma, whether to use his scooter for energy efficiency or rely on his thermal vest for warmth. Hours passed in a tense, grueling battle for survival. Finally, around 9 p.m., Patrick emerged from the cave after an exhausting 8.5-hour ordeal. Soon after, Vesa followed, and eventually, Kai made it to the surface. Although they had survived the dive, the trauma of leaving their friends behind would haunt them forever. The tragic incident led to the deaths of Jari H. and Jari Yu. Despite police restrictions, Patrick and expert divers, including Ricky Stanton, secretly planned and executed a successful rescue operation. They retrieved the bodies, and the story spread quickly. Later, Patrick and his team embarked on another cave diving adventure,